U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division, the Davis-Bacon Act as amendment. White House publication 1246, revised 2009, April. Public Law 107217, August 21, 2012, as amended. An act to revise, codify, and enact without substantive change certain general and permanent laws related to public buildings, property, and works as Title 40. United States Code, Public Buildings, Property, and Works. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives on the United States in America in Congress assembled. Section 1, Title 1, U.S. Code. Certain general and permanent laws of the United States related to public buildings, property, and works are revised, codified, and enacted as Title 40. United States Code, Public Buildings, Property, and Works as follows. Title 40, Public Buildings, Property, and Works. Subtitle 2, Public Buildings and Works, Part A, General, Chapter 31, General, Subchapter 4, Wage Rate Requirements. Section 3141, Definition. In this subchapter, the following definitions apply. 1. Federal government. The term federal government has the same meaning that the term United States and has in the Act of March 3rd, 1931, known as the Davis-Bacon Act. 2. Wages, scales of wages, wage rates, and minimum wage and prevailing wages. The terms wages, scales of wages, wages rates, and minimum wages and prevailing wages include A. The basic hourly rate of pay. B. For medical hospital care, pensions on retirement or death, compensation for injuries or illnesses resulting in occupational activity, or insurance to provide the forging or unemployment benefits of life insurance, disability and sickness insurance, or the accident insurance, for vacation and holiday pay, for defraying the cost of apprenticeship or other similar programs, or for other bona fide fringe benefits, but only where the contractor or the subcontractor is not required for the other federal, state, and local laws to provide any of those benefits. The amount of A. The rate contribution irrevocably made by contractor or subcontractor to a trustee or third person under a fund, plan, or program. And 2. The rate of cost to the contractor or subcontractor that may be reasonably anticipated in providing benefit labor to laborers and mechanics pursuant to the enforceable commitment to carry out a financially responsible plan or program which was communicated in writing to the laborers and mechanics affected. Section 3142, Range of Weights for laborers and mechanics. A. Application. The advertised specifications for every contract in excess of $2,000 to which the federal government for District of Columbia is a party for construction, alteration, repair, including painting and decorating, or public buildings and public works of the government or the District of Columbia that are located in State and District of Columbia, which requires or invokes the employment of mechanics and laborers, shall contain a provision stating the minimum wage to be paid various classes of laborers and mechanics. B. Based on prevailing wage. The minimum wages shall be based on the wages the Secretary of Labor determines to be prevailing for the corresponding classes of laborers and mechanics employed on projects of a character similar to the contract work in a civil subdivision in the state in which the work is being performed, or in the District of Columbia where the work is being performed there. C. Stipulations required in contract. Every contract based upon the specification referred to in subsection A must contain stipulations that 1. The contractor or subcontractor shall pay all mechanics and labor employed directly on the site of the work unconditionally and at least once a week, and without subsequent deduction or rebate of any account the full amount incurred at any time of payment, computed at a wage rate not less than those stated in advertising specifications, regardless of any contractual relationship which may be alleged to exist between the contractor or subcontractor, the laborers, and mechanics. 2. The contractor will post the scale of the wages to be paid in a prominent and easily accessible place at the site of the work. And 3. There may be withheld from the contractor so much accrued payments as contractor officer considers necessary to pay the laborers and the mechanics employed by the contractor or any subcontractor on the work. The difference between the rate of wages required to the contractor to be paid laborers and mechanics on the work and the rates of wages received by the laborers and mechanics and not refunded to the contractor, subcontractor, or their agents. Discharge of obligation. The obligation of a contractor or a subcontractor to make payment in accordance with the prevailing wage determinations of the Secretary of Labor under this subchapter and of laws incorporating the subchapter by reference may be discharged by making payments in cash, by making contributions described in section 3142BI of this title, by assuming all enforceable commitment to bear the cost and plan of a program referred to in section 3142BI2 of this section title, by any other combination payment, contribution, and assumption with the aggregate of the payments, contributions, and costs not less than a basic hourly rate of pay plus the amount referring into section 31412B of this title. E. Overtime pay. In determining the overtime pay to which a laborer or mechanic is entitled under federal law, this regular or basic hourly rate or other altered rate, which would premium rate overtime compensation, is computed, or the laborer or mechanic deemed to be the rate computed under the section 3142A of this title, except that the amount of payments, contributions, or costs incurred with respect to the laborer or the mechanic exceeds the applicable prevailing wages. The regular basic hour rate of pay or other alternate rate is the same as the amount of payments, contributions, or costs actually incurred with the respect to the laborer or mechanic minus the great amount of the contributions of the cost type described in section 31412B of this title actually incurred with respect to labor mechanic, or the amount determined under the section 314.2B of this title but not actually paid. Section 3143, termination of work on failure to pay agreed wages. Every contract within the scope of the subchapter shall contain a provision of that if the contracting officer finds that any laborer or mechanic employed by the contractor or any contractor directly on site of the work covered by the contract that has been or is being paid a rate of wage less than what the wages required by the contract being paid, the federal government, by written notice to the contractor, may terminate the contractor's right to proceed with the work of the part of work to which there are a failure to pay the required wages. The government may have the work completed by the contract otherwise, and the contractor and the contractor's sureties shall be liable to the government for any excess costs of the U.S. government incurs. Section 3144, the authority of Comptroller General to pay wages and list contractors violating contracts. A. Payments of wages. 1. In general, the Comptroller General shall pay directly to laborers and mechanics for all any accrued payments within the whole held under the terms of any contract wages and found to be due laborers and mechanics under the subchapter. 2. Right of action. If the accrued payments withheld under the terms of the contract are insufficient to reimburse all the laborers and mechanics who have not been paid wages, the required under the subchapter, the laborers and mechanics have the same right to bring a civil action and intervene against the contractor and the contractor's sureties as conferred by one person's furnishing the labor or materials. In those proceedings, it is not a defense of the laborers and mechanics except to agree accept less than the required rate of wages or voluntary made refunds. B. List of contract violating contractors. 1. In general, the comptroller shall distribute to all departments of the federal government a list of names of persons who comptroller has found to disregard their obligations to employees and subcontractors. And 2. Restriction on awarding contracts. No contract shall be awarded to persons appearing on the list or any firm, corporation, partnership, or association with this person shall have interest in until 3 years have elapsed from the date publication of the list. Section 3146. Effect on other federal laws. This subchapter does not supersede or impair any other authority otherwise granted by federal law to provide the establishment of specific wage rates. Section 3147. Suspension of this subchapter during national emergency. The President may suspend this provision of this chapter during a national emergency. Section 3148. Application of this subchapter to certain contracts. The subchapter applies to a contract authorized by the law that is made without regard section 370709 of the revised statutes of 41 USC 5 or on a cost-free fixed basis, otherwise without advertising for proposal if this subchapter otherwise would apply to this contract.